Was Buddha's decision to abandon his family a display of ultimate compassion, or was it something more complicated? What if his celebrated enlightenment came at a cost that history often overlooks? What if the man we see as the epitome of selflessness was, in some ways, driven by a deeply personal ambition, even a form of spiritual egoism? Today, we're diving into the story behind the image of the Buddha, the dark choices he faced, and if we can even trust our interpretation of this hero's life. The traditional narrative paints Siddhartha Gautama as a prince who, upon witnessing suffering, renounced his privileged life to seek enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. But what this sanitized version often omits is the profound impact his decision had on his wife, Yasudhara, and his infant son, Rahula. Why did he leave them behind? Was it truly necessary to abandon his familial responsibilities in order to achieve enlightenment? This question challenges our conventional notions of morality, duty, and the very nature of spiritual pursuits, as so many spiritual figures in the past have also left behind lives of familial normalcy to pursue a higher calling. The potential for misinterpreting his motives is significant, particularly when considering the subtle allure of spiritual ego, where the pursuit of enlightenment can, paradoxically, become a self-centered endeavor. By the end of this video, you will gain a deeper understanding of the historical, philosophical, and psychological factors that may have influenced the Buddha's decision. We'll explore the Buddhist concept of anatta, no self, the potential psychological motivations behind his actions, the concept of spiritual ego, and the potential negative consequences of prioritizing enlightenment over familial duty. Was he truly enlightened, or was he simply running away from problems he could not face? Stay with me, because the answers may challenge your most fundamental assumptions. Join us as we examine the dark side of enlightenment and grapple with the complex moral questions raised by the Buddha's life. Now, some of you might find this questioning of the Buddha's motives disrespectful or even sacrilegious, and that's understandable. It's natural to feel protective of deeply held beliefs and the figures who embody them. Some of you may have also made sacrifices in your lives for your family, which is also a deeply valid reason to be in opposition of this conversation. But our intention here isn't to denigrate the Buddha or undermine the value of enlightenment. Rather, it's to promote critical thinking and a more nuanced understanding of the human condition, and to recognize the validity of the many difficult decisions we face in our own lives. We are all on a journey, and sometimes that journey takes us down unexpected paths, forcing us to make difficult choices. But before we dive deeper into the Buddha's life, let's explore a philosophical concept that might explain some of his reasoning. Now, could the key to understanding why Buddha abandoned his family lie in a concept so foreign to the Western mind? Anatta, or no self. How can we reconcile this concept with the seemingly selfish act of leaving behind a wife and newborn son? Understanding anatta could be the very thing that helps us see the situation in a new light. Anatta is a core doctrine of Buddhism, one that radically departs from conventional Western notions of a fixed, permanent self or soul. It posits that what we perceive as our self is actually a collection of constantly changing processes, not a static entity. These processes are known as the five aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Think of form as your physical body. Sensation is how your body experiences the world. Perception is the sensory information that is being cataloged. Mental formations are your thoughts and emotions. And consciousness is your awareness of everything happening. According to anatta, none of these aggregates are you. They are simply temporary phenomena arising and passing away like waves in the ocean. The chariot analogy is often used to explain this. A chariot is not one single thing, it is a collection of parts. Wheels, axles, frame, etc. take away the parts and there is no chariot. So it is with self. To further illustrate this, imagine a river. Is it the same river from one moment to the next? No, the water is constantly flowing and changing. Or consider a flame. It appears constant, but it is continuously being replenished with new fuel. The Buddhist scriptures are full of discussions about anatta and its implications. They emphasize that clinging to the illusion of a permanent self is the root of all suffering. If there is no fixed self, how can we even begin to contemplate the implications? But what does anatta mean for personal identity and responsibility? If there is no fixed self, how can we be held accountable for our actions? What does it mean to be compassionate towards others if there is no essential difference between self and other? This concept could throw into question everything you know about who you are. And here is the key. If the Buddha truly believed in anatta, how might this have influenced his decision to leave his family? Was it an act of detachment or something more complex? Could it be that the Buddha's belief in anatta led him to see his familial relationships as less binding or essential than they might appear to others, that they were merely another illusion to overcome? How does this influence his decision? This idea challenges our deeply ingrained assumptions about family, duty, and love. Understanding this connection is crucial to understanding his mindset. Anatta might lead to a sense of detachment from worldly attachments, including family. Buddhism emphasizes impermanence and the acceptance of change and loss. The world is always in a state of flux. Things are always changing, and we are always changing. Clinging to things as permanent causes suffering. This doesn't mean cutting oneself off from loved ones, but being free to act with the right intention, without being bound by attachment. In this case, the right intention would be to serve all beings. Could it be that, to the Buddha, his family's suffering was part of the illusion of self that he needed to move beyond? The very act of leaving suggests he believed this. Look at other historical or religious figures who abandoned their families for what they perceived as a greater good. Were their actions justified? Consider someone joining a monastery, convent, or a long-term mission. These are all versions of leaving one's family for a perceived higher calling. Was Buddha's higher calling worth it? But what are the potential consequences of prioritizing enlightenment over familial duty? Did the Buddha's actions cause harm to his wife and child? Did his pursuit of enlightenment justify this harm? Exploring these ethical implications of anatta in the context of family relationships is incredibly important. Is it possible to do things that seem cruel but have good intentions in the long run? What do you think? This interpretation of the Buddha's actions is controversial and potentially unsettling. But is this the whole story? Could there have been other, more personal or psychological factors at play? Beyond philosophical conviction, could psychological factors have also played a role in the Buddha's decision? Is it possible that he was not only driven by enlightenment, but also by something less noble, a spiritual ego? Understanding this potential could dramatically shift our perspective. The spiritual ego is the idea that the pursuit of enlightenment can, paradoxically, become a form of egoism. Instead of dissolving the ego, the desire for enlightenment can inflate it, leading to a sense of superiority or detachment from others. The desire for enlightenment can become a new form of attachment, a subtle trap on the spiritual path. In the quest for no self, one is still searching for the self, as paradoxical as that may seem. How might the spiritual ego manifest itself? Perhaps as a sense of being more enlightened than others, a tendency to judge or criticize those who are not on the same path, or a desire for recognition or admiration for one's spiritual achievements. We can see this in many spiritual leaders throughout history. Take, for example, the very famous guru Osho, who amassed a fleet of Rolls-Royces while preaching detachment from material possessions. Was he truly enlightened, or was he caught in his own ego trap? What are the potential dangers of the spiritual ego? How can it distort one's understanding of anatta and lead to harmful or unethical behavior. How can we avoid falling prey to the spiritual ego in our own spiritual pursuits? Understanding this can bring us closer to the truth of enlightenment and further from the ego. So, what does all of this mean for our understanding of the Buddha? Was he a truly enlightened being, or simply a flawed human being struggling with his own ego and desires? We've arrived at the central problem, the tension between the Buddha's pursuit of enlightenment and his familial responsibilities. There are valid points to be made on both sides of this equation. Can both of these perspectives be true at the same time? This is where true understanding can begin. It's vital to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, something many people struggle with. There is value in both detachment and compassion, both personal growth and social responsibility. It's about finding the balance. The goal is to not fall into extremes on either side. What do you think Buddha's problem was? How can individuals balance these competing values in their own lives? How can we pursue our own goals without neglecting our relationships with others? How can we be both self-aware and compassionate? One way is to practice mindfulness. When we become aware of what we are feeling, we can make a decision on how to act instead of reacting. This is hard work that takes a lot of practice. It is much easier to simply let our emotions control us. Ultimately, the Buddha's story is not a simple case of either-or, but a complex and nuanced exploration of the human condition. Even if the Buddha's decision was flawed, it can still offer valuable lessons about the nature of self, duty, and the pursuit of meaning. In the end, it comes down to intention. What was his intention in abandoning his family? And can we ever truly know? Now, let's bring all of these ideas together as we move toward our conclusion, and towards perhaps the most profound insight of all. Stay with me. But even with the understanding of anatta and the potential influence of a spiritual ego, could there have been other external pressures that played a role in Buddha's decision to abandon his family? Was he solely driven by his inner quest for enlightenment, or were there societal expectations at play, subtly pushing him toward renunciation? Was there implicit or explicit pressure for men of a certain status to renounce the world and seek spiritual liberation? To understand this, we must delve into the social structure of ancient India. The caste system, with its rigid hierarchy, played a significant role in shaping individual roles and expectations. At the top were the Brahmins, the priestly class, followed by the Kshatriyas, the warrior class to which Buddha belonged. Below them were the Vaisyas, the merchants, and finally the Sudras, the laborers. Outside of this system were the untouchables. Beyond this structure, there was a class of wandering ascetics known as Shramanas, who renounced worldly possessions and dedicated themselves to spiritual pursuits. These ascetics were often highly respected and revered, seen as possessing special wisdom and spiritual power. The Shramanas were seen as holy men and were given reverence. They had renounced the world and were seen as closer to God because of it. There are many historical examples of figures in ancient India who renounced their families and kingdoms to become ascetics. The story of King Janaka, who, despite being a ruler, achieved enlightenment while still fulfilling his royal duties, is an example of this. But this was not always the case. Many other kings and princes chose to abandon their responsibilities and embrace the life of a wandering mendicant. This practice was so prevalent that it became deeply ingrained in the cultural psyche, creating a social pressure, particularly for those in positions of power and privilege, to seek spiritual liberation through renunciation. It was seen as the ultimate path to fulfillment, a way to transcend the limitations of worldly existence. What does this mean for Buddha? How might these societal expectations have influenced Buddha's perception of his own duty and purpose? Did he feel obligated to renounce the world in order to fulfill his potential and achieve enlightenment? Did he internalize societal pressures to the detriment of his familial responsibilities? Perhaps he believed that by renouncing his kingdom and family, he was not only fulfilling his own destiny but also setting an example for others, demonstrating the path to true liberation. This would have been a heroic choice in his culture. But consider this. Could this perceived duty to society have overshadowed his duty to his own family? Did the pressure to conform to societal expectations blind him to the needs of his wife and child? Did he think that his family's needs were secondary to enlightenment? But even if societal expectations played a role, what about the Buddha's personal struggles and inner turmoil? Was he truly at peace with his decision, or was he haunted by doubts and regrets? Is it possible that even after achieving enlightenment, the Buddha struggled with the emotional consequences of his choices? Let's consider the possibility that the Buddha experienced inner turmoil, doubt, and regret after abandoning his family. The idealized image of the Buddha often portrays him as a perfectly serene and enlightened being, untouched by the ordinary human emotions that plague the rest of us. But is this an accurate portrayal? Is it possible to be enlightened and still have regrets? Is it possible that even after achieving enlightenment, the Buddha struggled with the emotional consequences of his choices? We must consider the human capacity for cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort that arises from holding conflicting beliefs or values. When people act in ways that contradict their deeply held beliefs, they often experience a sense of unease or guilt. To resolve this discomfort, they may rationalize their actions, minimizing the negative consequences or exaggerating the positive ones. Could the Buddha have engaged in a similar process of rationalization, justifying his decision to himself while still experiencing underlying feelings of guilt or remorse? Was he able to ignore the cries of his son and wife, or did they haunt him? Let's look at some indirect evidence that might suggest the Buddha experienced inner turmoil. Certain passages in Buddhist scriptures hint at the challenges and difficulties of the spiritual path. The constant battle to overcome temptation, the struggle to maintain mindfulness, and the ever-present awareness of suffering all suggest that even the most dedicated practitioners are not immune to emotional distress. We also have accounts of the Buddha interacting with his former family members after his enlightenment. While these interactions are often portrayed as harmonious and uplifting, could they have also been tinged with a sense of awkwardness or regret? Could the Buddha have felt a pang of guilt when he saw his son, now a young boy, and realized that he had missed out on his childhood? Could he have seen the sadness in his wife's eyes, or did he simply see another being that he could help reach enlightenment? And here is a thought. What is more important, to act with compassion or to act justly? What are the implications of acknowledging the Buddha's potential inner turmoil? Does it diminish his achievements or undermine his teachings? Or does it make him more relatable and human, and therefore more inspiring? Perhaps by recognizing that even the Buddha was not immune to suffering, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the challenges of the spiritual path and find solace in the fact that we are not alone in our struggles. Perhaps the knowledge that he suffered makes us feel less alone. If the Buddha, the enlightened one, experienced suffering, what does that tell us about the human condition and the possibility of achieving lasting happiness? If enlightenment does not eliminate suffering entirely, then what is the point of striving for it? What does enlightenment actually mean? Let's connect the Buddha's potential inner turmoil to the broader Buddhist teachings on suffering, or dukkha. It's a central concept in Buddhism, encompassing not only physical pain and emotional distress, but also the inherent unsatisfactoriness of all worldly experiences. The Four Noble Truths, the foundation of Buddhist philosophy, begin with the acknowledgement of suffering. Life is suffering, suffering has a cause, suffering can cease, and there is a path to the cessation of suffering. The Eightfold Path offers a practical guide to achieving this cessation, emphasizing the importance of right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Consider that suffering manifests itself in many forms. It is physical pain, emotional distress, existential angst, and the impermanence of all things. Sickness, old age, and death are unavoidable realities. Relationships end, loved ones pass away, and all that we cherish is subject to change and decay. But maybe, just maybe, enlightenment involves accepting and understanding suffering, rather than escaping it entirely. By developing wisdom and compassion, we can learn to navigate the challenges of life with greater equanimity and resilience. The goal of enlightenment is not to eliminate suffering, but to change our relationship to it. But what are the implications of this understanding of suffering for our own lives? How can we apply the Buddhist teachings on suffering to cope with our own challenges and find meaning in our own experiences? How can we cultivate compassion for ourselves and others, recognizing that everyone is struggling in their own way? What if your suffering is caused by someone abandoning you and your child? Is that suffering still something that can be used to reach enlightenment? Perhaps suffering is a tool. What does the Buddha's story tell us about the relationship between personal enlightenment and social responsibility? Can we truly achieve enlightenment if we neglect the needs of others? If the ultimate goal is to alleviate suffering, shouldn't we prioritize the well-being of those around us? Let's directly address the tension between personal enlightenment and social responsibility. Does the pursuit of enlightenment justify neglecting one's duties to family and community? The Buddha's story raises important questions about the ethical implications of prioritizing spiritual goals over the needs of others. The core of the problem is that one must abandon their family, at least temporarily, to reach enlightenment. Is there another way? In Mahayana Buddhism, there is the concept of the Bodhisattva, an enlightened being who postpones their own final liberation in order to help others achieve enlightenment. The Bodhisattva embodies the ideal of compassion, dedicating themselves to the service of all beings. Contrast this with the Theravada Buddhist ideal of the solitary seeker, who focuses primarily on their own enlightenment. This path emphasizes personal discipline and meditation as the primary means of achieving liberation, sometimes at the expense of social engagement. The Bodhisattva ideal suggests that true enlightenment is not possible without a deep commitment to the well-being of others. So isn't abandoning your family the opposite of that? We must consider those who have successfully balanced personal growth with social responsibility. People like Mother Teresa, who dedicated her life to serving the poor and marginalized, and Mahatma Gandhi, who led India to independence through nonviolent resistance. These individuals demonstrate that it is possible to pursue spiritual goals while also making a positive impact on the world. So, how do we balance it? Is it possible to do both? What are the potential dangers of prioritizing either personal enlightenment or social responsibility to an extreme? The dangers of becoming overly self-absorbed or neglecting one's own needs in the pursuit of helping others. What is the ideal balance between these competing values? Perhaps the answer lies in finding a middle path, a way to cultivate both inner peace and outer compassion. But this story that we're talking about, the story of Buddha abandoning his family, is this story even worth telling? Is this tale that we've been examining of any value, or does it simply diminish a story that has had a positive influence on many? Stay with me as we begin to wrap things up, because what you hear next may leave you questioning everything. Is this story even worth telling? After all the analysis, the exploration of anatta, societal pressures, potential inner turmoil, and the very limits of enlightenment, one might reasonably ask, what's the point? Is there real value in dissecting the choices of someone so revered, someone who has inspired billions? Isn't there a risk in questioning such a towering figure, a risk of diminishing his message or undermining his positive influence? Perhaps it's better to leave well enough alone, to accept the traditional narrative without probing too deeply. But here's the counterargument. It's precisely because the Buddha is so revered that we must critically examine his story. Simplistic, idealized narratives, while comforting, often obscure valuable lessons and prevent genuine understanding. By grappling with uncomfortable truths and complex figures like the Buddha, we challenge ourselves to grow intellectually and spiritually. Questioning doesn't equal dismissal, it equals engagement. It means we're not blindly accepting dogma, but actively seeking deeper meaning. What kind of understanding is it, if we aren't even willing to question it? Consider how reevaluating historical figures and narratives has led to progress in various fields. For example, the traditional interpretation of Isaac Newton as a solitary genius struck by a falling apple has been challenged by historians who emphasize the collaborative nature of scientific discovery and the social context in which Newton worked. This reevaluation hasn't diminished Newton's achievements, but it has provided a more nuanced understanding of the scientific process. Or think about the figures involved in social justice movements. Re-examining their strategies, their successes, and their failures allows us to learn from their experiences and continue the fight for equality. Take Martin Luther King Jr., a man revered for his nonviolent approach to civil rights. However, a closer examination reveals the internal debates within the movement, the strategic compromises he made, and the criticisms he faced. Understanding these complexities offers a more complete picture of his leadership and the challenges of social change. If we don't critically engage with history, even when it challenges our assumptions, we risk repeating past mistakes. If we don't question our own beliefs, even when uncomfortable, we stagnate, failing to grow and develop as individuals. Think about it. If we don't reevaluate, are we really learning or just blindly accepting? This process of constant reevaluation is vital because you can't truly learn anything without challenging it, thinking critically about it, and deciding if it fits into your worldview. And if you blindly follow something, is that really learning? This is a skill the Buddha encouraged. So, after all this exploration, what have we truly learned? Can we summarize the journey, understand the why behind the Buddha's actions, and find a key takeaway that resonates with our own lives? Stay with me, because the answer may not be what you expect, and it may challenge your understanding of this iconic figure forever. Let's quickly recap our journey. We started by questioning the seemingly straightforward narrative of the Buddha abandoning his family for enlightenment. We've explored the concept of anatta, the idea of no self, and how it might have influenced his decision. We considered the societal pressures of ancient India, where renunciation was seen as a noble path. We also delved into the possibility of inner turmoil and the challenges of balancing personal enlightenment with social responsibility. We even looked at the potential influence of a spiritual ego. Now, let's ask again, what was the dark reason for the Buddha's actions? Here's the crucial point. There is no single, simple answer. The Buddha's decision was not the result of one single factor, but rather a complex interplay of philosophical beliefs, societal pressures, psychological motivations, and personal struggles. It's like trying to solve a complex equation with multiple variables. You can't isolate one variable and expect to find the solution. You need to consider all the factors and how they interact with each other. Imagine the Buddha feeling pulled in different directions. On one hand, he was grappling with the concept of anatta, the idea that the self is an illusion. This might have led him to believe that his familial responsibilities were less important than his quest for enlightenment. On the other hand, he was aware of the societal expectations placed upon him as a prince and a member of the Kshatriya caste. He likely felt pressure to renounce the world and seek spiritual liberation. And then, there was the very human desire for personal liberation, the yearning to transcend the limitations of worldly existence and achieve lasting peace. He was just a man, after all, and men have needs. All these factors likely came into play, shaping his decision in ways that are difficult for us to fully understand today. By recognizing the complexity of the Buddha's story, we can gain valuable insights into the human condition and the challenges of living a meaningful life. We can apply this framework of nuanced understanding to our own decisions and relationships, recognizing that there are often multiple factors at play and that simple answers are rarely sufficient. We can allow ourselves to feel the full spectrum of the human condition instead of suppressing it. This is something that is crucial for spiritual and emotional growth. So what is the key takeaway from the Buddha's story? What can we learn from his example, even if we don't agree with his choices? The answer you may find could change your life. Stay with me, because the key to finding the right path in your life is the path that you create, and that is custom tailored to you. What was the dark reason for the Buddha's actions? The truth is, the darkness lies not in a single, definitive answer, but rather in the inherent complexity and ambiguity of the human experience. It's in the struggle to reconcile conflicting values, the challenge of navigating societal pressures, and the ever-present possibility of inner turmoil. It's in the recognition that even the most enlightened beings are not immune to the human condition. The darkness is the part of ourselves that we don't want to look at or accept. The Buddha's story is not a blueprint for how to live one's life. It is instead a catalyst for self-reflection and critical thinking, a challenge to confront our own values and priorities. It's an invitation to find our own path, based on our own unique circumstances and aspirations. This means understanding yourself, what you value, what you can live with, and what you can't. It means knowing yourself better than anyone else does. No one else can decide what is right and what is wrong for you, but you. Consider the story of Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani activist who was shot by the Taliban for advocating for girls' education. She could have succumbed to fear and retreated into silence. Instead, she chose to continue her fight, becoming a global symbol of courage and resilience. Her actions, while inspiring, were also controversial. Some questioned her safety, arguing that she was putting herself and others at risk. But Malala, like the Buddha, had to make a difficult choice, weighing her personal aspirations against her responsibilities to others. She chose her path. Or consider someone who makes a bad choice that ends up benefiting others, such as Oskar Schindler. He was a womanizer and a profiteer, but he saved more than 1,000 Jews from the gas chambers. Ultimately, the pursuit of enlightenment, or any meaningful goal, requires a willingness to grapple with uncomfortable truths, challenge conventional wisdom, and embrace the complexities of the human condition. What matters most is not whether we agree with the Buddha's choices, but whether his story provokes us to think more deeply about our own lives and the values that guide us. What matters most is that this story has now made you think. What matters most is that this story has now made you question yourself. Section 16. The long game. Legacy, impact, and the unforeseen future. Even if the Buddha's initial actions caused immediate pain and disruption, could his enduring legacy, the vast positive impact he's had on the world for millennia, somehow justify those choices? It's a question that cuts to the heart of ethical dilemmas, forcing us to confront the complexities of weighing short-term harm against potential long-term good. What if the immediate pain was the seed of immeasurable future benefit? Is such a trade-off ever justifiable? To truly understand this, we need to consider the concept of karma, not just as a simplistic reward and punishment system, but as a complex web of cause and effect that stretches across lifetimes. Actions, like ripples in a pond, create consequences that extend far beyond our immediate awareness. The Buddha's teachings, born from his own quest for enlightenment, have inspired countless individuals to seek inner peace, cultivate compassion, and alleviate suffering. Think of the millions who have found solace in meditation, the countless acts of kindness inspired by Buddhist principles, and the social movements advocating for peace and justice rooted in Buddhist philosophy. What if the immediate abandonment, the localized pain, set in motion a global wave of compassion and understanding? Consider the Dalai Lama, a modern-day embodiment of Buddhist principles. His unwavering commitment to nonviolence, his tireless advocacy for human rights, and his profound teachings on compassion have touched the lives of millions around the world. He's a beacon of hope in a world often consumed by conflict and despair. His work has created change that has affected people all across the world. The Buddha's teachings, passed down through generations, are at the root of the Dalai Lama's work. This is an example of a butterfly effect, where one small action, like a butterfly flapping its wings, can set off a chain of events that lead to a major change somewhere else in the world. The Buddha's teachings are like a butterfly flapping its wings, and the change that the Dalai Lama creates is the hurricane. But here's where it gets complicated. How do we ethically weigh potential long-term benefits against immediate harm? Does the ends truly justify the means? Or are there certain actions that are intrinsically wrong, regardless of the outcome? Imagine a doctor who inflicts pain on a patient during surgery, knowing that it will ultimately lead to healing. Is the pain justified by the potential for recovery? Or consider a politician who makes a difficult decision that harms a small group of people but benefits the majority. Is the harm justified by the greater good? Perhaps we could consider if the intentions are coming from a good place. Can the means justify the end when the intentions are from a place of love? These are not easy questions, and they force us to confront the very core of our moral values. How can we truly assess the impact of our actions, given the inherent uncertainty of the future? Could the Buddha have foreseen the vast and enduring impact of his teachings? And have those teachings been consistently interpreted and applied throughout history, or have they been subject to unintended consequences and even distortions? Stay with me, because the answers to these questions will challenge your understanding of his legacy. Section 17. Unintended consequences and shifting interpretations. Even the most enlightened beings, the most visionary leaders, and the most well-intentioned individuals cannot possibly foresee the full consequences of their actions. The future is a vast and unknowable landscape, filled with unpredictable variables and unforeseen events. Was the Buddha, despite his enlightenment, somehow blind to the potential pitfalls of his teachings, the ways in which they might be misinterpreted or misused? Has the core message been warped and twisted? To explore this, we need to understand hermeneutics, the study of interpretation. Meaning isn't fixed or inherent in a text or teaching. It's actively constructed by the reader or listener, shaped by their own cultural context, personal experiences, and pre-existing beliefs. Think of it like a game of telephone. A message is whispered from one person to the next, and by the time it reaches the end of the line, it's often completely distorted. Similarly, the Buddha's teachings, passed down through generations and translated across cultures, have inevitably been subject to a process of distortion and reinterpretation. What was once a message of liberation and compassion may, in some cases, have been twisted into a justification for oppression or violence. History offers sobering examples. While Buddhism is often associated with peace and nonviolence, there have been instances of Buddhist extremism and violence throughout history. In some societies, Buddhist principles have been used to maintain social hierarchies and justify inequality. For example, some interpretations of karma have been used to explain and even legitimize poverty and suffering, suggesting that those who are struggling are simply reaping the consequences of their past actions. Think of the colonial era, when some Western powers used distorted interpretations of Darwinism to justify their exploitation and oppression of other cultures. Or consider the Rwandan genocide, where radio propaganda played a key role in dehumanizing the Tutsi population and inciting violence. This isn't to say that Darwinism or radio caused these atrocities, but they were manipulated and weaponized to achieve harmful ends. So, what do these unintended consequences mean for our understanding of the Buddha's legacy? Does the fact that his teachings have been misused diminish their inherent value, or does it simply highlight the importance of critical thinking and ethical discernment? Does this lessen the harm that the initial action caused? After all, no matter the intention, an action still happened. Even the most revered figures are subject to historical revision and reevaluation. As we continue, we'll see how this applies to the Buddha and how flawed actions can still contribute to a positive legacy. The next section will give context and begin summarizing the ultimate answer to all the questions asked. Section 18. Flawed Actions, Positive Legacies. Can flawed actions, choices that cause immediate pain and raise serious ethical questions, ultimately contribute to a positive and enduring legacy? It's a paradox that challenges our simplistic notions of good and evil, forcing us to grapple with the messy realities of human existence. How do we reconcile the potential harm caused by the Buddha's decision with the immense good that has come from his teachings? Perhaps the key lies in recognizing that even imperfect individuals can have a profound impact on the world. Flaws and struggles can make historical figures more relatable and inspiring, reminding us that even those who achieve greatness are still human. The Buddha's story wasn't perfect, but it still has something to offer. If he had been the perfect man, would the teachings have had the same effect? Is there something about the struggle to become better that makes the final result so much more appealing? Consider Martin Luther Jr., King Jr., a towering figure in the civil rights movement. His personal life was complex and included instances of infidelity, which have been subject to scrutiny and criticism. Yet, his leadership and advocacy for racial equality had a transformative impact on American society. Or consider Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, who famously proclaimed that all men are created equal while simultaneously owning slaves. These are contradictions that cannot be ignored, but they also don't negate the positive contributions these individuals made to society. Is it ever right for the ends to justify the means? Are some actions intrinsically wrong, regardless of the outcome? Ultimately, is it our place to judge an event that happened so long ago? What does all of this mean for how we understand historical figures? By embracing nuance and complexity, by acknowledging their flaws and contradictions, we can learn more about the human condition and the challenges of ethical decision-making. It's easy to cast judgment from the comfort of our modern perspective, but it's far more valuable to try to understand the context in which these individuals lived and the choices they faced. This understanding of the human condition is critical, because what makes us human is that we make mistakes and learn from them. As we prepare to provide the final answer and summarize all of the key takeaways, ask yourself, has the intent to do good been enough for the Buddha's positive legacy? As we arrive at the end of this exploration, I know we've meandered through some thorny territory, and perhaps even stumbled upon some uncomfortable truths. We asked, what was the dark reason that Buddha abandoned his family to seek enlightenment? And we circled that question, examining it from many angles. From the Buddhist concept of anatta to the societal pressures he faced, to the psychological motivations that might have driven his choices, to the inner turmoil he likely wrestled with, and finally, to the legacy he left behind, along with the unintended consequences that rippled through time. This wasn't a straight line to a simple answer, was it? This exploration wasn't about pinning down a single, definitive reason or casting judgment on the Buddha. It was about grappling with the complexities inherent in the human condition and the often impossible choices we face when navigating the treacherous waters of ethics, duty, and personal aspiration. But here's the thing. There is no single dark reason. The darkness, if we can even call it that, lies in the ambiguity itself, in the uncomfortable reality that we can never truly know the heart and mind of a man who lived millennia ago, a man who may not have even fully understood himself. The darkness is in the unsettling questions the Buddha's story forces us to confront. What are our responsibilities to those we love? What sacrifices are we willing to make in pursuit of our dreams? And can the pursuit of enlightenment ever justify the abandonment of those who depend on us? Life rarely presents us with clear-cut answers. We often make choices based on limited information, navigating a world of gray areas and conflicting values. Acknowledging the potential flaws and inner struggles of the Buddha doesn't diminish his legacy. It enhances it. It makes him more relatable, more human, and ultimately more inspiring. What if it makes his teachings more impactful? Would they still be taught if he was a perfect human being? His story resonates not because it's a perfect tale of enlightenment, but because it's a deeply human story of sacrifice, searching, and the struggle to reconcile conflicting desires. Even enlightened beings are not immune to suffering, doubt, or regret. The ultimate insight, then, isn't about finding a definitive answer to the question of why the Buddha left his family. It's about recognizing the value of embracing nuance and complexity in our understanding of the world. The Buddha's journey isn't a blueprint for how to live our lives. It's an invitation to engage in critical self-reflection, to wrestle with difficult ethical dilemmas, and to find our own answers to life's most challenging questions. The true enlightenment lies not in finding all of the definitive answers, but in learning to live with uncertainty and ambiguity, and still moving forward with intention and compassion. This story resonates far beyond the confines of ancient India. It speaks to the challenges we all face in balancing individual aspirations with familial responsibilities, the ethical dilemmas of leadership, and the critical importance of clear thinking in a world drowning in misinformation. How can you apply the lessons of the Buddha's journey to your own life, your relationships, and your community? What decisions are you putting off? So, I encourage you to approach the Buddha's story, and indeed your own life, with compassion, understanding, and forgiveness. Everyone makes mistakes. We all stumble and fall. The key is to learn from those experiences, to strive to do better, and to offer ourselves and others the grace to grow. Be kind and understanding towards yourselves. It's okay not to know all the answers. Now, I challenge you to reflect on your own values and priorities. How do you balance your personal aspirations with your responsibilities to others? What sacrifices are you willing to make in pursuit of your goals? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments section below. Let's create a community where we can explore these difficult questions together. If you're interested in delving deeper into Buddhist philosophy, ethics, or the psychology of decision-making, I've included some additional resources in the description below.